Good morning, everybody, our online viewers as well as the students present here. This is the, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is the second day of presentations, the first season of presentation for semester 1 students. And today they will be presenting on topics related to the neoclassical age. Let's have a look at their topics from here. So we will start with Shehzad, who would be presenting on satire, sentiment, and society, how Swift, Pope, Gray, and Richardson critiqued 18th century England, their diverse literary forms. Then we will have who will be presenting on Swift's Tale of a Tub, a mirror to human vanity and intellectual corruption. Then we will have Jaypal, who would be presenting on the Labyrinth of Satire, Unraveling Jonathan Swift, A Tale of a Tub, followed by NENSHIBEN. She will be presenting on comparison, A Tale of a Tub, and Swift. Followed by SHIVANI presenting on the topics of history, superficiality, and Epistemological judgment. Then we will have the statistics on the reign of the law and influencer culture. Then we will be presenting on the followed by RIDDHI would be presenting on the as a mock, followed by RUDRA be presenting on study. Followed by KHUSHI presenting the transitional. Then we have presenting something like society strategy, order to emotion, followed by some presenting on the language, emotional intelligence of girls. Then we will have who will be presenting about the statistics of English and identity, followed by Chetna presenting on the moral gaze of centuries, negotiating virtue, social judgment, and agent of Richardson's Pamela, contemporary women. Then we will not able to hear. Audible now. Hello? Audible now? Okay. So then after Chetna, we will have DIMPAL, who would be presenting on Richardson's Pamela and interpretation, followed by Divya, who would be presenting on Pamela and the birth of the English novel, the epistolary form and psychological realism. And finally, we will have Hiral, who would be presenting on psychoanalytic character, Pamela Andrews, and Mr.B in Pamela. So let's have first Shehzad present. The stage is yours. Stop sharing.
Hello everyone. Good morning to all. I'm SEJAD CHOKIYA and today I'm going to present on a topic satire, sentiment and society, how Swift, Pope, Gray and Richardson critiqued 18th century England through diverse literary forms. Here are my academic and presentation details. Here is the table of content. Here is the research question for my presentation. In what ways do Swift, Pope, Gray and Richardson use their respective literary forms satire, mock epic, elegy, and epistolary novel to reflect and critique the social, moral, and political concerns of 18th century England. And what does this reveal about the shifting priorities and sensibilities of the neoclassical period? Hypothesis: while satire and mock epic in Swift and Pope primarily critique social and political corruption, elegy and the sentimental novel in Gray and Richardson focus on individual emotion and moral reflection, illustrating a shift from public to private concerns. Despite these differences in form and focus, all four authors share a common purpose to influence public perceptions and behavior, demonstrating that literature served as a significant tool for social commentary in the 18th century. Okay, let's start with the introduction of the neoclassical age, which worked as a mirror for society with the help of literature. The neoclassical period, 18th century, emphasized reason, order, and moral clarity, reflecting the social, political, and cultural concerns of the age. Literature is a mirror of society, addressing class, morality, gender, and public behavior through different literary forms. Authors like Swift, Pope, Gray, Richardson used their respective literary forms to guide and critique society and their moral behavior. The period witnessed a shift from public moral concern to private emotional reflection, marking the rise of sentimentality alongside with the satire, as Pope and Swift used that. Understanding neoclassical literature helps explore how literary form shapes social commentary, provoking insight into 18th century England society and evoking human sensibilities. Here are the four authors that I choose to go through this topic: Alexander Pope, Thomas Gray, Samuel Richardson, and Jonathan Swift, who use the respective form to satirize and critique 18th century England. Satire in action, Swift's weapon against corruption and societal folly. Jonathan Swift used satire to attack 18th century societal norms, political corruption, religious hypocrisy, and human folly. In his Tale of Tub, he used irony, exaggeration, and parody to critique and also the corruption of church will be found in this topic, as you find that people are blindly following the religion, as we have this character Peter, Martin, and Jack, who are representing different ideology of Christianity. Social vanity and moral weakness. Satire serves as a mirror to society, forcing reflection on values, behaviors, and collective morals. Neoclassical purpose: combine wit and moral instruction to guide society. Then mock epic mirror Pope's wit and reflecting vanity. Alexander Pope transformed the classical epic form into mock epic to expose the vanity, superficiality, and presentationist of 18th century high society, as in Rape of the Lock, with a small act of Arabella Former's cutting his lock of hair by Lord Petre. He described this low. He used this low subject and high narration in his mock heroic epic, The Rape of the Lock. Pope's wit and balance reflect the neoclassical ideals of decorum, order, and moral restraint, while his irony subtly critique the moral decay beneath polished manners, as he mostly in most of his works he criticized beauty of his time. The poem become a mirror of society, obsession with appearance, revealing how moral triviality hides behind elegance. Elegy as an emotion critic, Gray's reflection on humanity. Thomas Gray's Elegy, written in a country churchyard, 1751, captures the emerging sentimental spirit of the mid-18th century, shifting focus on public satire to private emotion. Through melancholic reflection on mortality and obscurity, Gray elevates the life of the common people, challenging the era's class hierarchy and celebrating the shared human dignity. As Pope is one of the transitional poets who use the theme, as a character, or he used this kind of character who are ordinary people or came from the common background. The elegy function as a moral critic, suggesting that greatness and virtue exist beyond social rank or wealth, a quiet but profound social commentary. While with lines like "the paths of glory lead but the grave," line number 63, Gray universalized human experience, revealing the equality of the all in death and questioning society's material priorities. Sentiment as a social insight, Richardson's epistolary revolution. Richardson was one of the first one who used epistolary form in novel genre, especially Pamela 1740 and Clarissa 1748 used the epistolary form to explore the inner moral life of individuals, marking the turn from satire to sentiment. The latter form becomes a space of emotional authenticity, as we all know in the Pamela that we have in our syllabus, that the way Pamela described all his emotion through letters. Richardson transformed literary into moral conversation, as we have conversation between Pamela and her parents. Mr. B, there are 3 or 6 letters by Mr. B. All these shows the moral conversation between the people, especially in the Pamela and her parents' conversation. By focusing on female virtues, social mobility, and power dynamics, he exposed the gender injustice of 18th century England, linking sentiment with the moral and social reform. As many readers are not agree, or they do not like the ending of Pamela, as Pamela accepting all the situation and all the happening things around her, and she expect that this is what the life is. Convergence of forms mapping satire, sentiment, and society. The 18th century was not merely an age of reason, but an era where literature became mirror of moral consciousness, reflecting corruption, vanity, empathy, and reform. Swift-biting satire, Pope's refined mock epic, and Gray's meditative elegy, and Richardson's sentimental narrative. These all forms together give a mosaic form of moral inquiry. Despite their different form, they all focus on social impulse to awaken conscience, question, and hierarchy, and humanize virtue. From Swift's irony to Richardson's emotion, the movement traces a shift from public satire to private sentiment, from mocking society to mending it. Collectively, their works transform literature into moral liberatory, where reason meets feeling and society meets the self, defining the rule spirit of the neoclassical conscience. Dynamic intersection, authors, forms, and social commentary. I'll combine all these 4 authors. The 18th century witnessed dynamic intersections between forms and philosophy. As we all know, neoclassical era produced more literature rather compared to other literary eras. Swift satire. Swift satire was mostly allegorical, while Pope's mock epic transformed tribal conflicts into grand social allegories, revealing the vanity and superficiality of the upper class, as we found in Rape of the Lock. Gray's elegy turns emotion into ethics, mourning obscurity yet moralizing equality, giving poetic dignity to the humbles. Richardson's epistolary narrative democratized virtue, inviting readers into moral self-reflection and empathy. Each writer through his form translates art into moral action, briding aesthetic pleasure with ethical purpose, a hallmark of neoclassical conscience. Legacy and impact. Literature as a mirror and reformer. The literature of the 18th century endures as both a mirror of its age and catalyst for change, reflecting human folly while inspiring moral reform. Through their distinct forms, Swift, Pope, Gray, and Richardson, these writers reshaped the role of role of art from mere entertainment to ethical engagement. Their works reveal how literature could educate emotion, refine reason, and challenge injustice, preparing the ground for the romantic emphasis on individual feeling and moral imagination. Thus, the neoclassical spirit transcended its own era, provoking that the pen could not only reflect the word but reform it. Literature as a lens. Critiquing 18th century England, the literature of the neoclassical age served as a lens through which society examined itself, its manner, moral, and contradict. As Swift and Pope do use irony and wit to satirize absurdities, politics, class, and fashion. Gray and Richardson turn inward, transforming literature, moral and emotional mirror for the individual. Across satire, mock epic, elegy, and epistolary form, writers redefined art as a critic, balancing reason with emotion and judgment with empathy. Through this intersection, 18th century literature became the both record and a rebellion chronicling social reality while challenging its values. Here is the conclusion. Literature as a mirror. As all this, Swift, Pope, Gray, and Richardson used their respective literary forms to satirize and critique 18th century England. Together, these works reveal a shift from public critic to private conscience, showing how literature engaged with both society and the real. Neoclassical writers transformed literature into a tool of reflection, ethical guidance, and social reform. Here is the learning outcomes, references, and this is all from my side. If you have any question, please feel free to ask.
Hello. My question is that why do you describe literature of this period as
both a mirror and a reformer of society?
Okay, thank you for the question, Hiralba. This period described both as Swift and Pope do satire on society to mock them, to allegorically represent the society and religion, while on the other hand, Richardson and Gray work on morality and virtue. Morally, they provide kind of mortality, and Gray work on emotion. This is why this period is both mirror and reformer of society.
So my question is, how did 18th century writers turn from laughing at society to feeling for it?
Okay, thank you for the questions. How did 18th century writers turn from laughing at society to feeling for it? As Swift and Gray do satire on society and religion, while on the other hand, Pope and Gray use emotion and virtue to describe it, while Pope is laughing at society and beauty, but on the other hand, while he somehow and somewhere he critiquing society to change it, to reform this society, to reform the idea of beauty as its age of beauty, and this all the idea of decorum and all this thing. They try to define it. They, as we read Tale of a Tub and Rape of the Lock, somewhere it gives a humorous tone, but it's satirizing society to feeling for it. Okay, this is from my side. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hello everyone, my myself Dimple Parmar, and my topic is Swift Tale of Tub, a mirror to human vanity and intellectual corruption. And this is my academic information, and this is table of contents. And then my research question is, how does Jonathan Swift employ satire and allegory in A Tale of Tub to expose religious hypocrisy and intellectual vanity? And second, in what ways does Swift digression serve as a commentary on human pride and the corruption of reason? And my hypothesis is A Tale of Tub function as both a religious and intellectual satire, where Swift critiques human vanity as the root of all corruption, whether in a faith, knowledge, or authority. The deliberate chaos of the narrative and the parody of learned discourse mirror the fragmented and self-deceptive nature of human thought. Swift uses the mad modern critic and the digressive narrative as a deceit to reflect how pride distort truth and wisdom. And then introduction, A Tale of Tub, 1704 is one of Jonathan Swift's most complex satires, written during the age of religious conflict and intellectual pride, uses allegory, parody, and digression to expose human vanity and folly. And allegory also represent the reveal hidden meaning like moral and political. And three brothers, Peter, Martin, and Jake, symbolize the corruption of major Christian sects. Sweeps attack both religious hypocrisy and rational arrogance. As Levin said, Sweep unites madness, pride, and deceit as a central human flaws. The text mirrors the moral and intellectual decay of the 18th century society. And then historical and religious context. Early 18th century England, religious conflict. According to Levin, Swift structured a tale of Tub around the chaotic division of contemporary Christianity, using the three brothers to represent a fragmented religious scene of this age. Rise of rationalism and intellectual pride. Levin notes that Swift's satire target the modern critics' obsession with reason and innovation, exposing how rationalism often breeds intellectual arrogance rather than enlightenment. Swift mocks the age's overconfidence in human intellect. And third, A Tale of Tub critiques both religious hypocrisy and human vanity. As Levin argues, the work's design unites madness, pride, and deceit as central human flaws. Through religious allegory and satire, Swift condemns both the hypocrisy of religious institution and the vanity of human reason. Overview of a tale of Tub. Allegorical tale. Swift uses the three brothers as symbols of the main Christian sects, each showing how religion becomes the corrupter over time. Their quotes represent the original faith, later altered by human pride and hypocrisy. Story plus digression. The mix of tale and digression reflects the confusion of modern thinkers, exposing the absurdity of intellectual showmanship. Swift uses parody and irony to ridicule false learning and pretentious reasoning. Concept of human vanity in Swift. Definition of vanity. Vanity is excessive pride and the constant pursuit and admiration. Use of digression. Swift digression exaggerate learned pedantry into absurdity. And this is the quote. Swift's work in an olio, a fricassee or regout of ideas. Intellectual corruption in Swift satire. Intellectual corruption, definition and critique. Swift criticizes how knowledge instead of fostering wisdom is corrupted by pride and a satire of scholarly pedantry. Swift mocks scholars who overinterpret texts often to absurd disgrace and then religious zeal as an inflated knowledge. Theological excess is depicted as a scientia inflati, knowledge puffed up with ego. Faith transformed into a platform for pride, not humanity. And then religious satire and hypocrisy in A Tale of Tub. Swift use of allegory and parody. Swift display allegory and parody to expose religious hypocrisy. Public display of sanity marks inner corruption. Through exaggerate caricatures and symbolic episodes, he show how religious pretensions are often shallow. A dual nature, religious plus political satire. As Peterson argues, A Tale of a Tub function as both religious and political satire. The satire work on the two planes. A. Religious, attending pretentious form of devotion, dogmatism, and sectarian pride. And B. Political, ridiculing authority, factionalism, institutional abuse. And then design digression. Levin explained that Swift's digression parody the style of scholarly works and mock overly or complicated reasoning. The chaotic structure of A Tale of Tub mirrors the disorder of human thought and fetid vanity. The digression or madness humorously breaks from the main story, exposing the absurdity of human intellect gone astray, a direct reflection of Swift's satiric technique. And then political commentary in A Tale of Tub. Beyond religious critics, Swift targets political corruption and opportunism, highlighting how political figures like religious leaders manipulate ideology for personal gain. The satire draws parallels between religious hypocrisy and self-serving political behavior, exposing the moral decay in the both spheres. Swift's use of allegory and absurdity allows him to criticize the political establishment, covertly avoiding censorship. And then digression as a meta commentary. Swift digression are deliberately constructed, not random tangents. They serve as a meta commentary on the reading, interpretation, and intellectual vanity. The digression reflected the fragmented nature of human thought, mirroring how personal bias and pride disrupt coherent understanding. As Levin observes, the digression parody of the very act of reading and interpretation, showing how pride and distort understanding. The internationally chaotic structure mimics the disorder of scholarly pretension, mocking writers and readers who prioritize style over substance or obscure meaning of self-importance. And the satirical technique in A Tale of Tub, parody, hyperbole, allegory, and irony. Swift mimics the style of sermons, scholarly treatise, and classical prose to ridicule intellectual vanity. And then hyperbole, characters are grotesquely inflected preachers so full of wine they could light their path home. This exaggeration reveals a moral emptiness and pride. Allegory, the story of the three brothers Peter, Martin, and Jack represent Catholicism, Anglicanism, and dissenters. And then irony, the narrator appears devout, rational, but frequently contradicts himself. And then critical interpretation of Tale of Tub. Carl Peterson view. Peterson argues that Swift targets not only institutional corruption but also individual pretension and self-delusion. A Roger Webster perspective. Webster highlights Swift engagement with earlier satires like Adams and Rabelais to underscore how zeal, whether religious or intellectual, can easily turn into conceit. And then Swift lasting influence inspired later satirists. Swift's sharp satire profoundly influenced literary giants as Alexander Pope, Samuel Johnson, and Jane Austen, who similarly explored human folly, hypocrisy, and social critique. Modern relevance, his critiques of intellectual arrogance, political opportunism, and moral hypocrisy continue to resonate today as contemporary writers and commenters grapple with institutional fallings and self-serving elites. And then this is a conclusion. Swift's Tale of Tub is a timeless satire on human pride and moral blindness. Religion, intellect, and politics are shown as corrupted by self-interest. The digression and parody highlight the chaos of modern thought. Peterson notes the satire targets both institution and individual. Swift holds a mirror to humanity, exposing our endless pursuit of power and knowledge without humanity. And this is references. Thank you. This is my side. If you have question, please ask.
Dimple, my question is that what human traits does Swift criticize?
Swift criticize vanity and pride and also hypocrisy and personal gain for knowledge.
Hello, Dimple. My question is that who are the main character and what do they symbolize?
In the Tale of Tub, three main characters, Breton, Martin, and Jack, also represent Catholicism, Protestantism, and radical dissenters, and also misuse of personal knowledge. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jaypal. So my presentation topic is Labyrinth of Satire, Unraveling Jonathan Swift, or Tale of Top. This is my presentation information and academic information, table of content, and this is question and hypothesis. Research question is, how does Jonathan Swift use a structure of voice of Tale of Top to create a labyrinth of satire that explores the confusion, corruptions, and instability of religions and intellectual authority in early 18th century in England. Hypothesis is Swift deliberately set a Tale of Top as a chaotic and self-opposition labyrinth of digression and false, logical, and unstable voice to mirror of the disorder of the modern thoughts. This confusing structure he forces a reader to expression very focus. He criticizes revealing that satire can both expose reproduction of the intellectual choose of this age. My first topic name is A Tale of Tub. Tale of Tub Tale of Tub is a Jonathan Swift article masterpiece, first published in 704. It was not just a simple story; it was a complex blend and allegory, satire, and digression designed to critique society, religions, and liberty culture of this time. Main focus: leave-in examine of structure design of Jonathan Swift's A Tale of Tub, explaining how it form mirror of its satire intent arguments. The work appearance shows is deliberately designed Swift use disorder to reflect the confusion of modern critics, religions, and learnings. Modern critics degradation, Levin's connected with satire of critics, contemporary 18th century debated about interpretation and intellectual arrogance. Significance, the essay show how a Tale of Tub balance madness and method, making it a fragment from reflect of its central theme of corruptions of reason of modernity. Second topic is the core allegory of three brothers and courts. In A Tale of Tub, Swift used an allegory of three brothers and their court to satirize religious conflicts and corruptions. The plot. The father representing a god leaves each of three sons a simple court and will with a strict instructions not illustrate them. Peter, Roman Catholicism; Martin, Lutheranism; Lutheranism, Jack Calvinist અને dissenter. The satire, instead of following instructions, the brothers immediately decoded their coats with a fashionable shoulder cross and gold lace, symbolizing man-made, deconed ritual and corruptions that disordered their faith and okay, the split. The patter become bossy and controlling stand for Gothic. Jack become will and energy stand for extreme Protestant. Martin say calm and trist to fix thing. He stand his modern curse and England. Second, then satirical England and Gothic philosophy. John Street invert the mock philosophical system in the Tale of Tub, where the entire universe is imaging as a large suit of clothes. This metaphor underpin most of the satire in the work. Foundation metaphor. Women are described microcoats, complex suit with all the meaning, religious honesty, vanity, and conscience are reduced of the clothing items. Religious cloak, honestly shoes, vanity shirts, and conscience breeches. Satirical functions. These philosophical reduce spiritual and intellectual ideas, superficial appearance mock of the potential of the humanity by turning accelerated concept into material objects which expose their petty and observer aspects. Analysis in satirical allegory symbol drags down their represent making even ideas lacking appreciation, traveling or discussion. Second was uh, structure labyrinth, digression upon digress. The questions of interpretation of who control meanings. In the Swift satire, printing book could not longer be fully controlling by their author. Once published, a text could be changed or copied or misunderstanding by anyone. This is a conclusion. Swift A Tale of Tub is a masterpiece of controlling shows using allegory, personal, and structure, deliver a sharp and multiple layers satire. The work reader throughout a labyrinth of meanings, where search for one clear truth becoming part of the joke. In the end, it is not a puzzle to solve what and experience to undergo brilliant and unforgettable reflection and human folly told from both of you. Okay, there are references and thank you. If you have a question, you can ask me.
Jaypal, how does Swift satirize religious instructions using literary techniques in A Tale of a Tub?
Okay, their answer is a Tale of Tub. Swift satire religious structure using literature techniques by using allegory, irony, and parody. Second, I can't believe you.
Jaypal, my question is, how does Jonathan Swift construct a labyrinth of satire in A Tale of Tub to expose the absurdities of this age?
Okay, your answer is Swift use a complex, twisted satire in the Tale of Tub, mock religious hypocrisy and intellectual arrogance. Okay, thank you.
Hello everyone, very good morning. My name is VIRDA and this is my topic, Comparison of A Tale of Tub and Gulliver Travels by Jonathan Swift. This is my academic information, table of content, research question. How do Jonathan Swift, A Tale of Tub and Gulliver Travels reflect the evolution of his satirical techniques, philosophical concerns, and engagement with neoclassical ideas? And what does their comparison reveal about Swift's critical vision and modern critical receptions? Hypothesis. Both works embodies core neoclassical ideas, reason, order, critique of human folly, but Gulliver Travels responds more with modern readers and critical due to its philosophical depth and universal moral questions with transcend it historical moments. Introduction. This presentation aimed to explore the connection and contrast between these two texts, focusing on the satirical element of Swift. Jonathan Swift stands as one of the greatest satire in neoclassical age. Such a comparison helped illuminate Swift iconic critical vision and his endless, timeless works. Thematic comparison. Tale of Tub has a religion and free will conflict and fall learning, blinding faith in religion, chaotic digressions, saves and provokes. While Gulliver Travel have the political systems, weakness of human folly, and the moral structure of humanity and political critique. Style and techniques. Tale of Tub written in a very sharp method, but with long digressions, which is complex to readers, and it is playful confusion for the purpose, but it is a thick critical for readers. While Gulliver Travels have a clear and simple travelogue, which is very easy for the readers, Swift uses realistic details in these works. Both of texts has full of satire, political and philosophical concerns. Tale of Tub has a religious conflict between Catholics and Anglicans, attack on moral intellectual trends, while Gulliver Travels is a critique on Whig's party and philosophical permission about humanity. Example, Hoynans and Yahoos in part 4 of Gulliver Travels. Swift narrative voice. In A Tale of Tub, Swift uses an unrelatable narrative, while in Gulliver Travels is a real, believable person. There is a clear Swift narrative methods. In A Tale of Tub, direct monarchy, while in Gulliver Travels, it's a sublime irony, and Lemuel Gulliver changes his voice, reveal his satire naturally. Comparative critical view. Many critics believe that Tale of Tub is Swift's more daring and bold satire, while Gulliver Travel is most successful work by his career and is polished work by him. Critics often point out that both texts, despite their different forms, he questions human reasons and hypocrisy. Together, these two works have different sides of Swift geniuses, influence of neoclassical ideas. Both Tale of Tub and Gulliver Travels are influenced by neoclassical ideas. Swift uses this idea to teach lesson about morality, human behavior, and society through the satire. Gulliver Travels is demonstrate a more polished language, modern critical receptions, ethical concerns, narrative technique, and satirical power, philosophical and moral concerns. In Tale of Tub, Swift focus on religion and learning outcomes. In Gulliver Travels, he becomes broader than the previous work. Conclusion. Jonathan Swift's work show how genius satire and moral thinker on neoclassical period. My outcome from this topic, Swift satire is not easy to understand. A Tale of Tub is a famous work by Swift, but Gulliver Travel is more famous than A Tale of Tub. Some lines make Gulliver Travels more attractive, like, oh, it the word had been but doesn't. Arborthant in it would burn my travels. Gulliver Travel is Abhignan Shankuldalam of Jonathan Swift. These are references, and thank you. If anyone have question, to feel to ask.
Nancy, what is the role of the female in both works?
In both work, we don't have the more female characters. In Tale of Tub, we don't have the female character. But in Gulliver Travels, we have some of female character, but all are describe the lust and female beauty. Thank you. If anyone have any question.
Hello, Nancy. My question is how Swift use hypocrisy in both works.
Swift using hypocrisy through the political, social, and daily life routine in both of works. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Myself, Shivani DEGDA. My topic is the politics of the skin, Swift's critique of superficiality and epistemological judgment. These are my academic and presentation details. This is the table of contents. And my research question is, does Jonathan Swift, A Tale of a Tub, argue that a human preference for comfortable surface level appearances actively corrupt how we gain knowledge and causes political or religious division? And my hypothesis would be, yes. Swift's satire, particularly through the clothes philosophy, argues that humans willingly choose to be well deceived by agreeable surface rather than face difficult truth. This failure to look past the manufactured exterior, the politics of skin, is the root cause of moral, epistemological, and societal breakdown. So, in introduction, A Tale of a Tub, Jonathan Swift's satirical masterpiece. The text satirizes the human preference for comfortable surface over the painful reality of depth. I will analyze the clothes philosophy, the reduction of religion, politics, and the man itself to mere external garments. Swift launches an assault on modern epistemology, the way we claim to know things by showing how it is corrupted by superficial visual judgment, the rise of the superficial viewer who actively chooses to be well deceived rather than face difficult truth. The satire functions as a moral test, challenging the reader to reject superficiality and engage in true discernment. This is about Jonathan Swift, and it is about overview of Tale of a Tub that we know already. That's why we jump to the main point. The allegory of three brothers. The three brothers representing Christian denomination, Peter represent Catholicism, embodies the Roman Catholic Church characterized by its adherence to tradition, elaborate rituals, and hierarchical structure. Martin represent Anglicalism, symbolize the moderate Protestant Reformation, seeking a balance between tradition and reform. Jake representative dissenters, radical Protestantism and dissenters known for fervent attempts to strip away all perceived corruptions, sometimes to an extreme. The codes, the pure Christian doctrine, identical codes gifted by their father with a strict command, never altered them. These codes symbolize the original uncorrupt Christian doctrine and divine truth meant to remain pristine. The trimming, the corruption of vanity and excess, added decorations and embellishments to the codes representing worldly pride, doctrinal excess, and human innovations. Swift uses these trimmings to satirize how superficial appearance and man-made interpretation replace genuine faith and obscured the core spiritual truth. Digression, Swift's satirical toolbox. satire of literary and intellectual style. Swift aid random and confusing digression to make fun of the messy, show-off writing style of modern authors of his time. He mainly targets fake intellectuals and critics, especially in the digression on critics, showing how their judgments are shallow and repetitive. Swift turns deep ideas like enthusiasm into simple body function like vapors, talking about how modern science reduces everything to matter and mechanics. Inversion of enlightenment thought. In the digression on Mendes, Swift says people are happier when they believe in illusion rather than facing hard truth. He flips enlightenment value, people prefer easy belief instead of questioning and discovering truth. The digression are written to distract readers on purpose, making them realize they too enjoy surface level entertainment more than deep thinking. The politics of the skin, core metaphor, the close philosophy and materialism. The philosophy reduces the entire cosmos and humanity itself to mere clothing and superficial surfaces. Man is satirically redefined as a microcode where the soul is ignored in favor of the visible material outfit. Swift uses this critic materialism, reducing human essence purely to the physical exterior, dismissing inner reality. The political weaponization of surface, the skin or clothing define the absolute boundary of human knowledge and judgment. We can know nothing beyond the surface. The politics of skin means that power is maintained through agreeable surface appearance and control perception regardless of inner church. Superficiality functioned as a politically weaponized tool in the 18th century, actively concealing inner flows, difficult realities, and systematic corruption from the public view. The flaying metaphor, peeling back layers. The central message is contained in the iconic quote about the woman being flayed and how much it altered her person for the horse. This shocking image established that beauty and truth are purely skin deep. Removing the surface reveals the repulsive raw reality underneath. The metaphor directly critiques superficial epistemological judgment, the belief that surface appearance is sufficient for knowledge. Flaying symbolizes the necessary painful act of probing beneath the fashionable coat or the ornamental bow to find essential defeat. It forces the reader out of the state of happy delusion that the superficial viewer prefers. The flaying metaphor acts as a moral test, challenging the audience to risk looking past the agreeable surface to the uncomfortable ugly truth. Critique of superficiality. Humans inherently prefer credulity over rigorous curiosity. This preference is driven by the desire to avoid the pain and suffering of difficulty, non-flattering truths. Swift critiques early empiricism, showing the sense are easily fooled and never examined rather than the color. The focus on outward luster and fashion causes moral and critical judgment to fail. The text proves that all knowledge systems are corrupted by the human eye's willingness to be deceived. The collective embrace of surface judgment is the root cause of the general human folly and schism that defines the tale. Epistemological judgment, how we know the folly of the modern mind. Swift satirized the pursuit of knowledge. The human mind actively favors of imagination over memory and verified facts. Swift suggests the deep pursuit of truth leads to madness or delusion, often reducing visionary insight to mere physical vapors. The unreliable senses and illusion. The satire mocks reliance on pursue sense data, arguing over sense are easily fooled by the deceptive codes. The eye, the primary organ of modern knowledge, is inherently a fool that chooses blindness to avoid difficult intellectual or spiritual suffering. These dissenters are mocked for seeing with their ears, criticizing the reliance on private subjective relevance that bypass public reason and shade a verified observation. Exploitation of flaws. Leaders exploit this flaw by selling pleasant illusions that are easily accepted as the truth because they bypass rational critique. broader implication and modern relevance, the danger of judging by appearances. Swift found that only looking at the surface always causes division and corruption. The deepest problem is when people willingly choose to be fooled by easy, nice looking exterior instead of looking for the hard truth. Why the book still matters today? The book's ideas about the skin perfectly describe our modern world of filtered reality, where we prefer a pleasing look over difficult reality. The tale tells us that we must actively look past and fake layers and challenge the manufactured reality we see in public life today. In conclusion, Swift uses the skin or clothes metaphor to launch a comprehensive critique of superficiality in politics, religion, and literature. The central argument is that core flaw is the human mind's preference for happy illusion over the painful effort of true discernment. Lasting impact is the tale offers an enduring moral challenge, questioning the very foundation of our epistemological judgment. And the final lesson is the most profound corruption is the willing surrender of the eye, our failure to look past the manufactured exterior. In a world full of distracting tubs, we must be the fox and actively hunt for substance beneath the surface. And this is the learning outcomes tables. These are the references I taken. Thank you. Any question?
Hello, Shivani. My question is, what term does Swift use to describe the state of being happy fooled?
Swift used the well deceived to describe the state of being happily fooled.
So, Shivani, my question is, एक second. So, Shivani, my question: what is the rejected in favor in the skin?
So depth or soul is rejected in favor of the skin. Again, thank you. That is from my side.
Good morning, everyone. I am BHARGAVI Barad, and today I will be presenting on the Rap of the Lok, a mirror of 18th century culture and prophecy of modern vanity. This presentation focused on how Alexander Pope used satire and irony reflects the super specially in society of British society. It also connects with we are in modern culture, fashion, pride, and social appearance. These slides show my academic information, and here is outline of your reference for my presentation. And let's now start. So my research question is, how does the Rap of the Lok reflect the social and cultural values of 18th century in British society? And this answer was Alexander Pope. The Rap of the Lok served as a satirical commentary on the superficiality and vanity prevalent in 18th century British society, using humor and irony to critique the aristocracy and obsessions with appearance and social status. Let's now jump. The Rape of the Lok, satire in 18th century society. Alexander Pope, the Rape of the Lock may appear to be a light and humorous poem, but it actually performs a deep social critique. My thesis argues that Pope's use a trivial incident and cutting off lack of hair to expose the hollowness and artificially of 18th century aristocratic society in this world. Let's look. Pope was influx stolen lock of hair into the cosmetic event in the epic conversations. He was described a machinery battles and quads highlight the displacement is heroic value and the ritual of drawing room and card table. Uh, critic of core social values. Rape of the lock present of the self is constructed thou consumer goods. The lock symbolize social capitals and not personal sentiment. The culture was present a scared totality, ritualized beauty as her primary weapons of source of power, and then uh, courtship is strategic games. Female power is precious of rooted in public reputations. Poetic form was the precise heroic couplet from mirror of artificial structure society and describe the Locke's ascent of start, immoralized triviality, and Pop's final verdict on a society that's venerates vanity. And then about author Pop. Uh, Alexander Pope was the premier voice of Augustine, as known for his intellectual sharpness and moral insight, the refined poetic style. He preferred the heroic couplet and using its balance and rhythm in express satire and moral culture. His major work is include an essay on criticism which define his neoclassical ideas. The Rape of the Lock, a mock epic, is aristocratic favorite in the poem, and then neoclassical context and culture. Neo emphasize on reason, order, harmony, and decorums inspired by classical models and literal prize with the clarity in formal preparations and the social milieu, rise of the consumer society and socially ambitious aristocracy, fashions, luxury, appearance become curical markers of status and identity, professional of coffee house and saloon as spaces of public intellectual exchange in social performance, and the satirist era, this culture of public reputation, social ritual created a perfect target for the pop's critics. The neoclassical value of order is ironically contract with the frivolous disorders in aristocratic life. The period's tension between its idea of rational order and the reality social vanity provides the essential context for understanding Pop's and satirical project in the Rape of the Lock. And then the poem is structured as 5 canto, mock-epic. First one is the awaking and homage. Second canto is the present the journey and protections. Third canto is present the climatic and battle. Fourth one the descent into chaos, and fifth canto is present the mock heroic battle and apotheosis. The Rape of the Lock presents supernatural machinery, sleeps and gnomes repels present, and epic battles, the card of games and subsequent battle of wits and snuff present. Reflections of 18th century culture as satirical lens and key of culture reflections. Then themes and symbolism, the religions of appearance, gender, power, social currency, and the satire of scale. Literary style and technique, heroic couplets and irony and wit, and third one is classical allusions and modern relevance in 18th century, lens in 21st century, the cultural of self-corruptions, economy of social capitals, and the satire of outrage. And then conclusion, The rape of the lock endured not as the historical relevant but as the living critical of Scottish birth then, now that privileged performance our substance. The Pop's genuine lines in his fusion and aesthetic allegiance with the providing in that one of the most serious criticism can be dealing in today time. And final, the Pop is power is critic we compare in modern time in social media and other pride and beauty. This is my learning outcomes, and this reference get I1. If you any one question, you can ask me freely.
Hello, Bhargavi. My question is, how does Pope use the from the mock epic in the Rape of the Lock?
Okay, thank you for your question. Pope turns in travel event the cutting Belinda's hair into an epic scale satire using heroic couplets, classical allusions, and epic conversations. He exposed the vanity, superficiality, and performatic culture 18th century aristocracy.
Bhargavi, my question is, why is the rape of the lock relevant today?
Okay, the poem critiques the appearance over substance, just like a modern social media culture. Belinda's vanity mirrors self corrections and social reputation, while a scandal over a small incident anticipates viral outrage and cancel culture. Thank you. This is from my side.
Hello, good morning everyone. My name is MILANBHAI. Today my presentation topic is Satire in Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock. This is my personal information, table of content, and research question is, how effectively does Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock use mock heroic satire to critique the vanity and frivolity of 18th century aristocratic society? My hypothesis is the Rape of the Lock successfully employs mock heroic satire using humor, exaggeration, and irony to expose and criticize the trivial concern of vanity and social presentation of the aristocracy, reflecting broader moral and cultural value of the neoclassical period. Introduction. Alexander Pope's, the master of neoclassical satire, born in London, England, lived during the neoclassical age, suffer from tuberculosis of the spine, known for biting wit, moral vision, and mastery of heroic couplet. His poetry reflects clarity, balance, and social criticism. Major works: The Rape of the Lock, The Dunciad, and Essay of the Man. What is satire? Satire, a mirror to society, a literary technique that uses humor, irony, and exaggeration of ridicule to expose and criticize human vice of social flaw. Purpose: to correct moral behavior and provoke change through laughter. Satire is both entertaining and educational. It's make a readers laugh while making them think. Type of satire. There are two types of satire: Oriental satire and Julian satire. Context of the Rape of the Lock. Publication: original publication in 1712, revised edition in 1714 with additional cantons and epigraph. Inspired based on the real life incident, a young nobleman, the Byron, cut the lock of hair of Arabella Farmer, which caused a mirror scandal of high society. Poise transformation. A travel personal core into the mock epic poem evaluate the ordinary event to epic proposition with wit and elegance. Target of satire, vanity and obsession with appearance, superficial social equipment, and aristocratic frivolity and pretentious. Significant. Mock heroic style in the rap of the law. Definition: a mock heroic poem applied to grand style and structure of classical epic. Purpose: to mock social and presentation, to expose the absurdity of high society value. In the poem, Belinda beauty routine is compared a warrior preparing to battle. Sylphs act as a divine protector of lady reputing. A card game is described like a heroic war. Effect: the poem glorious a travel and reveal to emptiness of the aristocratic priorities. Target of satire, vanity and obsession with appearance among 18th century aristocrats, gossip, flirtation, and social presentation in upper class society. Pope's intention: to expose the emptiness and moral shallowness of fashionable life, to correct through laughter, blending with moral reflection, use Oriental satire, gentle humor rather than harsh and attack. Message and key quote. There are some key quotes. Satirical device used by Pope: irony, exaggeration, parody, humor. Belinda, the Byron, and the Sylphs, society in satirical form. Themes: there are the major theme is vanity and superficiality, social class and aristocracy, gender roles and courtship, human folly and travel despite. My literary outcome conclusion. Alexander Pope, the Rap of the Log, stand a masterpiece of satire, combining humor, irony, and mock heroic style to criticize the superficial value of the society. Through wit and exaggeration, Pope transformed a trivial social quarrel into an epic reflection of human vanity, pride, and moral emptiness. The poem reveals not only the absurdity of 18th century aristocratic life but also timeless truth about human folly. Pope's genius lies in the ability to blend elegance with moral insight. His playful tone hides a deeper critique of materialism and self-importance, showing how trivial matters often dominate human truth. The Rap of the Log, this remains both of sparkling social comedy and profound moral satire. This is my resources and thank you. And free to ask, give me a question.
So, Milan, my question is what is the main theme of Alexander Pope's The Rap of Locke?
Okay, Bhargavi. Main theme of the Rap of the Log is vanity and the superficial nature of high society. Pope used humor and satire to show how people treat small trivial matter like a lock of hair. Another is
What makes the Rap of the Log mock heroic poem?
it's called a mock heroic poem because Pope used the grand style of epic poetry to describe a small, unimportant event. These contrasts make a poem funny and highlight the foolishness of the people involved. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So let's start my presentation. Presentation on the Rap of the Log as a mock epic poem by Alexander Pope. This is my research question and hypothesis. My research question is: how does Alexander Pope use a mock epic conventions in the rape of the lock to satirize 18th century society. Hypothesis: Pop employs a classical epic from form to elevate a trivial incident, revealing and ridiculing the superficiality and vanity of aristocratic culture, demonstra- demonstra- demonstrating that such human follies are timeless. And next, introduction. The Rape of the Lock is written by 1712 and revised 1714 is Alexander Pope's most celebrated mock epic poem. It satirize the trivial concerns of 18th century aristocratic society by treating a minor incident, the cutting of Belinda's hair, with the grandeur of classical epics. Scholars like Tripti Bhati and Richik Banerjees emphasize how Pope uses satire with epic tradition to expose the social vanity. Next, meaning of the mock epic. A mock epic imitates the style and structure of a classical epic but applies them to trivial subject. It uses elevated language, invocation, supernatural machinery, epic simile, and heroic battle for a comic or satirical effect. The Rape of the Lock 1712 and 1714 is Alexander Pope's most celebrated mock epic poem. Pope context and purpose. Pope wrote the poem to reconcile two families after a quarrel between Lord Vitry and Arabella Parmar. The poem reflects early 18th century England's fascination with fashion, beauty, and superficial social rituals by elevating a trivial event to epic proportions. Pope exposes the absurdities of aristocratic culture. Next, Belinda as a mock heroic. Tripti Bhattis describes Belinda as a micros, microcosm of 18th century aristocratic womanhood. She embodies superficial beauty, elegance, and pride, qualities glorified and ridiculed simultaneously. Her arming scene parodies the preparation of epic heroes for battle. Next, mock epic features in the poem: invocation of the muse, parody of epic openings, supernatural machineries, self and norms replace gods and goddess, epic battles, card games, and hair cutting scene mimic heroic conflicts, epic simile and elevated diction exaggerate the trivial. Journey and descents. Belinda's movement echo epic voyage. Supernatural machinery. Pop invites a world of self spirits and norms to mirror epic deities. They guard Belinda and influence events, but are whimsical and powerless, reinforcing the satire. Banerjee calls them political tools of mockery, used to critique power and gender norms. Next, satire and social critique. The poem critique the vanity, hypocrisy, and triviality of high society. It contrasts epic seriousness with aristocratic pettiness. Scholars argues that this mockery carries ethical and political undertone beyond mere humor. Beyond humor, the poem is a sharp social commentary. Next, conclusion. The rape of the lock elevates a trivial event to epic proportions, creating humor and critique simultaneously. The poem remains a masterclass in mock epic techniques and social satire. Pop's use of mock epic devices transforms a petty social event into a mirror reflecting the moral emptiness of high society. The fusion of grandeur and triviality achieves both humor and criticism. The essence of a true mock epic, therefore, the Rape of the Lock stand as both a comic masterpiece and a moral commentary on human vanity. And the next, this is my reference, and thank you. Any question?
So, Riddhi, my question is, how does Alexander Pope use epic conventions to create a humor in Rape of the Lock?
So, Bhargavi, Pop uses classic epic elements like invocations, supernatural beings, and battle scenes, but applies them to a trivial event, the cutting of a lock of hair. This contrast between grand style and small subject creates humor and satire.
So Riddhi, my question is, why is Belinda called a mock heroine in the poem?
Belinda is called a mock heroine because Pop presents her like an epic hero, but her concerns are shallow and materialistic. Instead of courage of sacrifice, she displays vanity and pride, symbolize the superficial of 18th century society. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rudra UPADHYAY, and today we have a presentation on the neoclassical period. So today's my topic of presentation is Paradise Lost and the Rape of the Lock, a comparative study. So let's begin. These are my academic information, and this is table of content which I'm going to discuss today. So my research question of this topic is, how does Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock employ and subvert the epic conventions established by John Milton in Paradise Lost to achieve satire and social critique? And hypothesis would be the presentation explore two very different uses of the epic form, like Milton's Paradise Lost and which is theological epic, whereas Pope's The Rape of the Lock, a playful mock epic. Both are masterpieces in their own right, but functions very differently. So let's begin. Paradise Lost, a 1667 published book by John Milton. It is an epic written in 12 books on the subject Fall of Man. Whereas The Rape of the Lock is a poem by Alexander Pope, a neoclassical poet, published in 1712, which is based on just a trivial incident of cutting a lock of hair of Belinda. Milton write his epic very religiously and Pope with social wit. Yet both use epic devices, invocation, supernatural machinery, and heroic battle. And so in this presentation, I'm going to compare them both styles. So first understand epic and mock epics. So epic, like Milton's Paradise Lost, which is written in long narrative poetry with grand subject and theme, with heroic and cosmic themes. And purpose of an epic would be to teach morality. Whereas a mock epic, like example, The Rape of the Lock by Alexander Pope, uses epic conventions but applies them to trivial matters like high subject and very low theme. And purpose of the mock epic would be satire, irony, and humor. So let's compare the style of Milton and Pope, how they both different from each other, and how what kind of similarity both of them has. So Milton invokes in Paradise Lost a Holy Spirit and tell her that to justify the way of God, he is a way of God to man. He is writing this epic. On the other side, Pope invokes the muse in his mock epic, and Pope's muse is very fashionable manner he uses and playfully echoes Milton while undercutting seriousness. So Pope is using seriousness, but with the subject is very trivial. So here I have put the two questions. First is from Paradise Lost, which is Milton asks to his muse to justify the way of God to man, and second is Pope's question to muse to asking on a very trivial subject that how the lock of hair was cut by a baron of Arabella. Now, scale and scope of conflict. We all know literature should have conflict, and that's why it should conclude on a right or a tragic manner. So we all know that in Paradise Lost, there is a war of God and Satan, in war set in heaven, and fall of angel, fall of Satan, and temptation in Eden. These are very biblical and grand narration. On the other side, the rape of the lock, it is just based on the incidents, cutting of a lock of hair, and it magnified into a cosmic battle with mock seriousness. So Milton's conflict is cosmic and theological, while Pope deliberately reduced grandeur to social triviality, turning to Salon into a battlefield. Now, Pope and Milton both uses supernatural elements, like Milton used angels, God, and Satans and demons, which is mentioned in Bible. On the other side, Pope used sylph, gnomes, and spirit, and name of the sylphs are Uriel and Umbriel, etc. So Pope adopts Milton styles like grand messengers, but interventions in spirit are whimsical, not theological. So also Pope uses characters like Milton, but it is far trivial from the character of Milton. Milton has character like Satan, Adam and Eve. They are very grand subject to present. On the other side, Pope has the characters like Belinda, Baron, and Clarissa, which are very who are very trivial in their role. Now, style, language, and epic similes. Milton obviously used so many kind of epic simile to describe the fall of Satan, whereas Pope uses heroic couplet instead of blank verse, and witty, concise, and sparkling style. And mock similes exaggerate trivial things, like Belinda's eyes are compared to sun. So on the last, intertextual connection between the Rape of the Lock and Paradise Lost. I am reading that Pope borrows Milton's epic structures and devices in the Rape of the Lock, and the echoes of Paradise Lost lend the poem a shadow of moral seriousness. He is not mocking just Milton himself, but rather using grandeur of the epic form as a tool to satirize human vanity and trivial of aristocratic concerns. Okay, so let's quickly jump into conclusion that Milton creates a cosmic, tragic, and moral vision with Paradise Lost. On the other side, Pope in his The Rape of the Lock present a cosmic, a comic, and a satirical vision that deflects tribal and dispute into mock cosmic battles. And despite this contrast, both poets rely on epic convention, such as these are supernatural machinery and extended simile, etc. So this was all about the comparison between The Rape of the Lock and Milton's Paradise Lost. So here the references which I have used. Okay. Now, if anyone has any questions, so you can ask. Yeah. Obviously Milton, because he was, we can call the father of English literature compared to Shakespeare. He uses epic simile in very long narration with very long, like in 30 or 35 lines, he uses epic simile to just describe the fall of Saturn. Okay, now any other questions?
My question is, why is the Pope muse different from Milton muse in the innovation?
Okay, thank you for this question. Because Milton Milton wrote a grand epic in very serious subject. So his muse should be very serious in nature. Whereas Pope's muse, his friend John Carroll, who is asking Pope to write this poetry, is very trivial in matter itself, because it is relay on the subject and the satire of aristocracy itself. Okay, so I hope the answer is satisfied for you. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
So, good morning everyone. I am KHUSHI. So, my topic is the transition poets. Let's start. This is my academic information, then table of contents, then this is my research question and hypothesis. How did transition poets bridge the gap between the structural reason focused poetry of the Augustan age and the emotional nature-oriented poetry of the Romantic period? Then hypothesis is transition poets combine classical poetic structure with personal emotions and reflection, creating a literary bridge that influenced the emergence of romantic ideals in poetry. So let's start with introduction. Transition poets bridge Augustan reason and romantic emotion, combining formal discipline with personal feeling. They return neoclassical structures but experiment with lyrical sensuality and introspection. The age of sensibility captures their emphasis on emotion, virtue, and moral reflection. Poets like Gray and Young highlight elegiac tones, exploring death, memory, and human fluidity. Historical and cultural background. Growth in literacy and print culture expanded access to poetry beyond elite audiences. Enlightenment rationalism coincided with highlighted interest in moral sensibility and feeling. Graveyard and Gothic aesthetic popularized themes of morality, melancholy, and sublime reflection. So, transitional poets reflect the tension between reason and feeling during this cultural shift. Let's this about major transitional figures. Thomas Gray blends classical elegance with melancholy in Elegy, written in a country churchyard. Edward Young's night through music, meditative and moralistic tones. Robert Burns uses Scottish vernacular to valorize emotion and everything life. Thomas Chatton's medieval pastiches expresses early romantic imagination. So, together these figures form a bridge between classical form and romantic innovation. This is formal and linguistic innovation. So, transitional poets mix neoclassical decorum with conversational diction. Nature and rural landscape replace urban satire as a central poetic setting. Sound device like innocence and internal rhythm enhance mood rather than witty elegance. So, the transition point begin exploring lyrical freedom while retaining formal sophistication. So, this is a key themes precautionless. emphasis on subjective reflection and interpretation replaces impersonal satire. Meditation on morality, transition, and humanity pervades their work. Nature serves as a both mirror of feeling and moral guide. So, transition poet balance reason with emotion, linking past and future literary styles. So let's talk about Thomas Gray. He emphasized on subjective reflection and interpretation, replacing impersonal satire. Then, cult of sensibility emphasizes moral simplicity and emotional responsiveness. Nature serves as a both mirror of feeling and moral guide. Thomas Gray, Elegy, Reflection and the Sublime. Gray's poetry reflects the Augustan tradition but anticipated romantic sensibility through emotional depth. His elegy, written in a country churchyard, emphasis on morality, memory, and social equality. Gray's integration of landscape with emotional reflection foreshadow romantic emphasizes on nature and sentiment. About Robert Burns, Scott's vernacular decomposes poetry and highlights authentic emotion. Folk song rhythm connect oral tradition with literary form. Satire and humor coexist with emotional sincerity. So Burns' vernacular lyric prefigures romantic emphasis on individual experience. Robert Burns' lyricism and popular voice. He integrated Scottish folk traditional, making literature accessible to common readers. Nature serves as a backdrop for human emotion, reinforcing themes of love, friendship, and morality. Burns' contribution lies in blending folk culture with literary art, setting and stage for romantic lyricism. So this is a transitional influence on a romanticism. Wordsworth and Coleridge inherit reflective lyricism for Gray and Burns. Focus on impersonal experiment legitimizes the poets as a moral and aesthetic subject. Transitional sensibility establishes modern lyric subjectivity. So this is critical debates and perspectives. Critics dispute whether transitional is a historically real or representative. Socio-cultural studies emphasizes class, region, regional and linguistic diversity. The category remains a useful heuristic for understanding literary change. So let's move on. Conclusion. Transition poets show literary evolution as a gradual, not revolutionary. They link enlightenment rationality with romantic imagination. Their experimentation shaped the modern lyrical and reflective voice. Studying them clarifies period overlaps and cultural continuations. Transition poets reveal how the emotional and formal innovation coexist. Their legacy underlines the creative power of literary transition between classical and romantic sensibilities. So this is my learning outcome, then resources, and thank you. Any question?
Khushi, my question to you is, how was a significant cultural shift during the period of transitional poets?
Thanks for question. There was a decline in aristocratic patronage, encouraging poets to write for personal expression and new readerships. Another?
My question is, what do transition poets brings in terms of literary movements?
Okay, transition poets bridge Augustan reason and romantic emotion, combining formal discipline with personal feeling. So, thank you.
Hello everyone. Good morning. Hello. Good morning everyone. So I'm JENCY RATHOD and today my presentation topic is reflections of society in Thomas Gray's Elegy from Order to Emotion. Here's my academic information. Here's the table of contents of my topic. Here's my research question. So how does Thomas Gray's Elegy written in a country churchyard reflect the shift in 18th century society from a rigid social order to a more emotional and empathetic understanding of human worth? So here's my hypothesis of my topic. So Thomas Gray's Elegy in a country churchyard embodies a significant central shift to the rigid social order of 18th century. We can see that in this hypothesis that the villagers' emotions and everything matters a lot, and through the poetic meditation on morality and social inequality, Gray challenges the establishment hierarchy by honoring the dignity and hidden potential of common rural lives, often overlooked by society. And we can mainly see the Enlightenment ideals of reason and social rank to romantic ideals, and emphasizing empathy, emotion, and universal human experience. And this shift in tone and theme marked the poems as both product and its time, and a key influence on later literature focused on personal feeling and social critique. So here's the introduction about Thomas Gray. He was a English poet born in 1716, widely known for he was really thoughtful, and his style was really reflective, and he was well educated at prestigious institutions like Eton College and Cambridge University. So his most famous work is Elegy written in a country churchyard, where he gained a lot of fame and great acclaim because it touches on universal human experiences such as death, memory, and social inequality. And his background as a scholar and observer of society shaped his poetic vision, and making him a key figure bridging the rational enlightenment and the emotional romantic movement. So here's the Elegy written in a country churchyard. A short summary. So the Gray's Elegy written in country churchyard is really powerful meditation on lives of common rural villagers who are buried in a peaceful churchyard. So this poem basically emphasizes on how death is great equalizer, placing both rich and poor in the same resting place and erasing social distinction. And in the end, Gray contrasts the rigid social order of his time, where nobility and wealth defined person's worth, with great dignity and unrealized potential of humble. And this poem uses symbols like yew trees, the shade, which represents a powerful aristocracy. But through his sensitivity and respectful tone, Gray honors the hidden virtues of the villagers, and he also suggests that all lives deserves recognition, respect, and their emotions should matter, and regardless of social status. So the next point is the social order in Gray's time. So during the 18th century, society was really strictly divided by class. We can see the rigidity during this period between the nobles, clergymen, and the lower classes, and everybody. So social mobility was limited, and birth often determined as like person's opportunities in the lives. So Gray's Elegy critiques the hierarchical order by quietly giving voice to those who were typically overlooked, and especially rural poor. And he suggests that many of these people has talents and qualities, but they are not noticeable by the other people simply because they lack education and social status. And his famous line is that the path of glory lead but to the grave, which reminds readers that no matter how high one rises in social rank, death eventually levels all the distinctions. And this reflects that growing awareness in literature and social order should not be the only way to value human life, especially and emotional insight should be there, and empathy were becoming really important too during this period. So from order to emotion, Gray's poetic, we can see that his work shows really careful balance between the formal rules of poetry common in his era and more personal emotional tone. Although his writing fits the Western ideal of order and reason, and this elegy contains really deep feelings of grief and compassion for ordinary people, and he also follows that conventions, but also he allows the emotions to surface, and the emotions are shown really softer and more human side to his reflection on mortality. Scholars also have noted that how Gray obeyed the sense of order, but let his personal feelings subtle betray themselves, and this reveals that the transition from purely intellectual poetry to one that embraces emotional depth, which later becomes a hallmark of the Romantic period. Here is the several themes. We can see that this elegy explores several important themes. Firstly, mortality and equality. These are the central themes, and death is portrayed as the great leveler, which erases all social differences. And second, it touches on social inequality. And third, we can see that Gray really emphasizes on the empathy and dignity of every human being, regardless of their social rank. And these themes mark a shift from strict focus on social order alone. And this emotional awareness in Gray's elegy paved the way to later writers to explore feelings and social critics more openly. Here we can see the table where lower class villagers are represented in the elegy as rude forefathers, and upper class aristocracy are represented in the elegy as their present symbolized by the yew trees shade and grand tombs, and universal human experience which represents in the elegy death as the common leveler. And we can see the symbolism also. And this table really helps to visualize that how Gray moves the readers from noticing social divisions toward understanding universal human experience, implications for society and literature. So Gray's elegy had a profound impact on literature. So it also inspired the Romantic movements and focuses on individual feeling and the natural world. And this poem challenges the fairness of rigid social hierarchies by suggesting that many valuable lives are hidden beneath the social divisions. Here's the conclusion. Thomas Gray's elegy is caught between traditional social order and growing awareness of human dignity. And this poem mourns the inequality of social status while affirming the value of every human life regardless of the class. And here is the learning outcome, and here are the resources. Thank you. Any question?
So, JENCY, my question to you is, how does Thomas Gray's elegy reflect the shift from social order to individual emotions?
So, Rudra, thank you for the question. So, Gray's elegy moved from Gray's elegy moved from describing social values, and it explores the human emotions more, and it also reflects the changes that we should move to our duty. The emotions matters a lot, and that's it.
So, JENCY, my question is, in what way does the poem portray society through emotional reflection?
Thank you, KHUSHI. So, Gray really uses he describes villagers as like ordinary people, like into a symbolism of universal humanity, and Gray uses this concept, especially because he uses emotions to reflect and questions the rich people, and we can see the rigid class system by this work, and we can also see the depth of importance of human emotions and morality. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Sandeep Jetwa, and today I am going to present the language of the heart, emotional truth in the poetry of Thomas Gray and Robert Burns. This is my academic details as well as presentation details, and this is the table of content. Let's go with the research question of mine. How do Thomas Gray and Robert Burns construct and convey emotional truth in their poetry, and in what way do their linguistic and stylistic choices anticipate the romantic ideal of sincerity and individual feeling later embodied by Wordsworth and Coleridge? And this is the hypothesis. This study hypothesizes that both Gray and Burns, though emerging from distinct cultural and linguistic context, serve as precursors and romanticism through their shared pursuit of emotional authenticity. Grow working within the moral and aesthetic restraint of a neoclassical form, internalizes emotion through reflective tone and balanced diction, expressing sincerity through meditative melancholy rather than overpart passion. Burns conversely externalizes emotion through vernacular immediacy and folk rhythm, crafting a voice of sincerity grounded in lived experience and the language of common life. Thus, despite their differences, both poets transform poetic expression from rhetorical ornaments into the language of heart, anticipating the romantic claims that genuine poetry springs from powerful feelings recollected in quality. This is the basic introduction, the language of heart. In the second half of the 18th century, English poetry began to turn inward from wit to feelings, from formality to language of the heart. This shift was not sudden but evolved through transitional poets like Thomas Gray and Robert Burns, whose works captured the stirring of romantic sensibility long before Wordsworth manifesto in lyrical ballads in 1798. Gray's Elegy, written in a country churchyard in 1751, speaks with a measured melancholy, transforming personal emotion into universal reflection. His language, through classical tone, reveals a deep emotional sincerity beneath restraint. Burns' writing in the Scots vernacular bring feelings into the realm of the common man, spontaneous and authentic and rooted in lived experience. Together, they articulate an emerging poetic ideal that truth of emotion may surpass the polish of rhetoric. As Winbrod notes, Gray's Elegy represents a poem of moral choice and emotional reconciliation, while Broadhead argues that Burns' hybrid diction constructs a new model of sincerity within a linguistic diversity. Their poetry, though born of different cultural words, the English university and the Scottish flow field converges in their pursuit of emotional truth. preparing the ground for the romantic revolution in feelings. Let's go with the historical and literary context. In late 18th century, the rise of sensibility and the sentiments realism, neoclassical decorum, brevity, control and balanced style. Meanwhile, the vernacular revival in Scotland and rural England seeks authenticity in voice. Grace Elegy in 1751 was enormously influential in shaping the graveyard school of poetry. Grace Elegist finds himself reactive rather than dominative of his moment. Burns participates in a Scotic vernacular revival as a poet of the common speech. So this is Thomas Gray's inward elegy and controlled feelings. Here's the some key features in Gray's approaches: mediative and contemplative tone, universalizing moral reflection like death, memory, humility. Syntax and diction restraints of feelings is mediated, not explosive. Use of nature, rural setting, silence to evoke inner mood. So here is a we have quotation. The curfew tolls the knell of a parting day. This is the first line from his elegy. Scholarly remarks: Grace Elegy has been read as a poem of moral choice and resolution. It represents a moral completion rather than raw emotional outbursts. So Robert Burns' vernacular voice and emotional immediacy. Here is also some key features of Robert Burns' approach: use of Scots dialect, colloquial speech, folk song forms, direct address, emotional intimacy, and ethical sympathy to common people or nature or animal. Code switching between Scots and English registers to amplify expressive nuances. And we have the other quotation: we slicked crown timorous beats on opening of to a mouse. Scholarly remarks also: Burns is integral to the 18th century vernacular revival. The experiments with language and deploys it in unexpected ways. His writing is a crucible in which existent language are alchemized. Here is comparative close reading of there. So the observation is tone and distance. Gray maintains a reflective distance, but Burns is emotionally present. Address an audience. Gray addresses a universal audience, and Burns addresses a local or the particular one. Register and diction. So Gray's English is elevated, and Burns blends Scott dialect and English. And emotional appeal: Gray's pathos is mediated, but Burns is direct and spontaneous. And we have anticipating romantic subjectivity. Gray's interior mediative mode and Burns' voice of people both gesture toward romantic values of feeling, intersection, and individuality. Wordsworth ideal emotion recollected in tranquility merges Gray's reflection with Burns' sincerity. Burns' linguistic hybridity prefigures later romantic experiments in voice and language. Broadhead argues that Burns' language prefigured Wordsworth radically revolution of poetic language. Wolf and Grace Elegy influenced on poetic reception. So this is my learning or what I have learned from this. By the end of this represents me and you will be able to define the idea of emotional truth in 18th century poetry, and its shift from reasoned with heartfelt sincerity. It explains how Thomas Gray through reflective melancholy in Elegy written in a country churchyard, transforms personal emotion into universal moral reflection. And Van Broad calls it a moralized sensitivity, re- re- reconciling emotion with reflection. Identify how Robert Burns, through vernacular diction and song form, creates a linguistic intimacy and emotional authenticity. Broadhead sees Burns' hybrid diction as a vehicle of sincerity and social identity, and compares Grace restraint and Burns spontaneity as two paths toward romantic emotional expression. Recognize their shared influence on Wordsworth's idea of poetry as emotion recollected in uh, tranquility. So overall, learners will understand how Grace calm reflection and Burns' heartfelt simplicity together form of the foundation and romantic sincerity, the true language of the heart. So this is the conclusion. Gray and Burns mediate two complementary modes of emotional truth, one through the reflection and the other one is through the immediacy. Together, they help make poetry more inward, more human, and more responsive to ordinary life. Their experiments in tone, voice, and language paved the way for the romantic celebration of feelings and subjectivity. Suggestion for further study: apply computer, computational and stylistic to track sentimental diction evolution from Gray, Burns, or the Wordsworth. So here are some resources. Now, if you have any question, you are free to ask.
So my question is, how does Thomas Gray emotional truth in Elegy written in a country churchyard?
Gray conveys emotional truth through reflective melancholy and moral contemplation. His calm and balanced diction transforms private sorrow into universal emotion, revealing sincerity through restraint rather than passion, bright between neoclassical reason and romantic feelings.
Hello, Sandeep. So my question is, in what way does Robert Burns' poetry reflect the language of the heart?
Okay. So Burns' use of Scott's vernacular song, rhythm, and direct emotional address gives his poetry warmth and authenticity. He speaks for common people and expressing genuine emotion in a simple way. Heartfelt language and anticipates the romantic ideal and of what we can say sincerity. Okay, so this is from my side. Thank you.
So, hello everyone. My name is Aditya Ratsi Gohil, and on the second day of our presentation, my topic is the linguistic choices of Robert Burns, Scott, English, and the identity. So, here is my academic details and the personal details, and here is the table of content which I will present today. So, here is my research question: that how does Robert Burns' strategic use of both Scottish and the English reflect his negotiation between the Scottish identity and British culture influence? My hypothesis is Robert Burns deliberately switches between the Scottish and the English to express his dual identity, using Scots to affirm his local roots and emotional sincerity, and English to engage with the wider literary and social expectations. This linguistic flexibility shows that his language choices were not accidental but a conscious act of cultural self definition. Here is the introduction. The dilemma and the flagman of poet. Robert Burns used both Scotch and the English in his poetry. His language reflects both his Scottish identity and his place in the British culture. Burns was not just a simple farmer, but a clever and skilled poet. He carefully chooses which language to use depending on his audience and purpose. Scottish language showed his warmth and humor and local pride. English helped him to reach educated readers and sound more formal or refined. His switching between the languages made his poetry rich and expressive. Burns' language choices reveal his creativity, intelligence, and cultural awareness. Through his writing, he helped keep the Scots language alive and respected. Evidence from his letters. Burns wrote letters to his friend where he showed clear switching between the Scottish and the English. In one letter, he uses strong Scots word to show his local roots. In another letter to the same person, he wrote in very polished English. This shows he chooses how to speak and write depending on the audience. It was not a mistake, but a smart choice to use different languages. The Burns myth. Many people think Burns was just a natural poet from the countryside who wrote in his simple native dialect. Actually, he was well educated and very thoughtful about how he wrote. There was a famous label, Heavenly Taught Polygman, which made people think he was only a rustic poet, but that was a bit wrong. Burns knew how to play different role from different listeners and readers. Some scholars say Burns got stuck with the image he created for himself. His historical context. In the 17th, Scotland was going through cultural and language changes. Some wanted the Scots people to speak more like English people, especially in the cities like Edinburgh. Important figures like Thomas Sheridan gave talk to promote this English style. Other Scots, including nationalists like John Ramsay, wanted to keep Scottish language and identity alive. Burns was caught between these two identities and used language carefully. Copia verbatim concept. Copia verbatim means having a large supply of words showing language skills. Burns had a great knowledge of both Scots and English language forms. He uses different style or registers of the language on purpose depending on what the poem needed. This is similar what we know called code switching, shifting between the language or form. Linguistic variety. In his letters, Burns' letter shows how he changes his language from different people. For different people, in a letter to William Nicol, he uses Scots. I am sitting down here. Then Forfothan as a cock, friendly, funny, informal. Here is the language he uses in the Scot. In another letter, soon after he wrote, I am now arrived safe in my native country. Polite, formal English. Here we see he uses both of the languages at the same time in the different letters. He uses Scottish to the warmth and friendship, English to respect and formality. This is an early example of code switching, changing language based on the audience. Literary analysis, Thame or Shentner. Burns' poem Thame or Shentner starts with a lot of Scots words like Campman Billis, meaning market seller. The poem rhymes with the words unique to Scots language like ham to home and dame to lady. But at the end of the poem, Burns switching to the English words and rhymes like a storm and warm. He also changes the word ending from the Scottish style to the English style to change the mood of the poem. Technical linguistic features. Burns uses many special Scottish words that showed his local culture. He used apostrophes to show missing letters in words, like in informal speech. Sometimes he uses English spelling to Scots word. All this was done carefully, not by accident. This mixing shows Burns' creativity with the language, political and cultural dimensions. Using Scots was Burns' way of showing pride and being Scottish. He was part of a movement to bring back the Scots language in writing and culture. His use of Scots was also a political statement against those who wanted everyone to speak only English. This helped to create a unique Scottish voice in literature. The modern connection. Today we know that people who move up to the society often uses languages or the dialect to the fit in. Burns' life showed this. He went from the small village to a big city and changed how he spoke. Modern Scottish writers like Ivory Wells also switches between the Scott English in their work. Burn is something compared to the English poet John Keats because both dealt with the criticism. Like in our Gujarati, there are many our Gujarati artists that we are representing Gujarati language in the different nations. But even though they are connected to their native language, like Ram Mori, writer who wrote short stories, and he wrote in the typical Desi Gujarati, at we say Tadabdi Bhasha, which we use in the villages. Here is my conclusion. Robert Burns uses both Scots and the English on purpose to show who he was and where he came from. By mixing the two, he kept his Scottish identity alive while also connecting with a wider audience. His language choice was smart and meaningful, not natural or accidental. Burns showed that language can express cultural emotion and pride, and his work helped make the Scots language respected in the literature. Like our so many writers and our readers and so many poets and all are doing in society. Thank you. Here is my references. And is there any question?
Hello. Will you please define the concept of copia verbatim and explain its relevance to Burns' work?
Oh, okay. Thank you for your question. Copia verbatim is a term signifying a large supply of word and demonstrating advanced language skills. This concept is relevant to the Burns because he possesses a great command of both Scottish and English, which enable him to purposefully use different style or registers of language depending on the need of specific poem or letters.
Hello, Aditya.
Hello.
So my question is, explain the Burns' myth and how it contrasts with the reality of his literary skill.
Thank you, JENCY. The Burn myth is the popular belief that Burn was a simple natural poet from the countryside who wrote in his native dialect without much thought. In reality, he was well educated and highly deliberate about his writing, skillful adapting different roles from various audiences. The famous label Heavenly Taught Polyglot contributed to this inaccurate perception. Thank you.
So hello everyone, myself Chetna Bhalia. Today I'm going to present the moral gaze across centuries, negotiating female virtue, social judgment, and the agency from Richardson Pamela to contemporary women. This is my academic information as well as presentation information, table of contents, and the research question is, how does the moral gaze operates to monitor and regulate women's behavior in the historical literature like Pamela? And how is this reflected in societal expectations? Hypothesis: female agency is shaped by societal and the moral scrutiny, operating strategically within the constraint imposed by class, gender, and the cultural norms. In historical context, as exemplified by the Pamela, women negotiate virtue and moral expectations to gain a social recognitions and the exercise limited choice, while the moral gaze through characters, society, and the readers enforces complaints and the hierarchies. In contemporary context, women navigates overlapping constraint of the race, class, and the gender, asserting autonomy through activism, legal empowerment, and the digital self-representations. Across time, female agency shows both continuity in the adaptive strategies and the transformations in the visibility, scope, and modes of resistance, reflecting the enduring interplay between societal judgment and the individual action. The introduction. First, we have to understand the conceptual foundation, like the understand the moral gaze and the female agency. What is the moral gaze, female virtue, and agency? This presentation is depend on these three aspects. First is the moral gaze. Societal and the literary mechanism monitor women's behavior, enforces conformity across time. For example, in Pamela, Mr.B observing Pamela reflecting societal scrutiny. From ancient to the modern time, we can say that the moral gaze is only focused on the female virtue. Culturally constructed ideas of chastity and the morality can both constrain and the empower women strategically. For the judging women, the what is the center of the judgmental? The chastity is the central idea. For example, Pamela's modesty and the gain social recognition. Agency, capacity to resist, negotiate, and act within the social patriarchal constraint. For example, like Pamela's strategic responses shows active choices despite limitations. Still, there are patriarchal mindset, but the women get choice, or they are step outside of their patriarchal mindset and go out of and see the freedom of herself. Understanding this concept provide the theoretical lenses for analyzing female roles, historical and today. Historical contextualizations, like the Pamela's negotiations of virtue and social norms. Pamela struggles between personal morality and the societal expectations. Society is fixing her virtue on the society's expectations. Social judgment like enforces class and gender hierarchies. The sentimental novel emphasizes moral growth and the emotional depth. Pamela functions as both subject and agent, negotiating more moral and the social pressure. Mechanism of the moral gaze, like surveillance, judgment, and the virtue in Pamela. Mr. B and the societal observes enforces complices with the moral norms. Readers are positioned as a moral evaluators, creating multiple layers of judgment. There are some steps or the criteria that society is judging women through that criteria and fitting if they are shifting that terms in the women's virtue. Virtue acts as a social capital, rewarding compliance while reinforcing hierarchies. Literature and the society work together to shape and regulate female behavior. Female agency under constraint, strategic negotiations in the Pamela. As you can see the chart here, the Pamela shows negotiations, moral fitness, and the strategic compliances. Agency is a context-dependent, constrained by the class, gender, and the societal norms. Resistance exists with the limitations, not the absolute freedom. Pamela have some limitations in her because of the letters she is using to transfer her information. So it is become a limitations for her. Women exercise adaptive strategies under patriarchal security. Agency is relative and the strategic. From private to public scrutiny, the moral gaze and the modern women. If we shifting Pamela's into the modern time, the modern women face digital surveillance, social media judgment, and the public moral scrutiny. Like the intersectionally shows overlapping constant of the race, class, and gender. Everything is changed. The situations is changed 18th century to the 21st century, but the patriarchal mindset is still static. Historical and subtle contrast within the modern overt public evolutions like showing continuity and the transformation. Female scrutiny, like the persist, but the visibility and the tools of the moral evolutions have involved. Contemporary female agency, like the activism, legal empowerment, and the self-representations. Pamela have no any type of the legal information or legal empowerment, but now in the modern time, women leverages legal tools, activism, and the social media to assert autonomy. Agency operates under ongoing moral and the societal scrutiny. Strategies shows resilience and the adaptations linking historical patterns to the modern context. Contemporary agency reflects continuity of the strategic actions and adaptations across time. Theoretical framework like the feminist criticism, virtue ethics, and the cultural studies like the feminist literary criticism like challenges patriarchal narrative shaping virtue from the ancient time to the modern time. There are several texts which reflect that the feminist literary criticism. Virtue ethics highlights the morality as the socially constructed and performative. Cultural studies examines societal norms shaping female behavior and judgment, combining literally and the ethical and cultural lenses to explain female agency historically and the today. Continuity and the transformations involving moral scrutiny and the female agency, like the moral gaze and the persistence, evolutions and the resistance evolve. Pamela, like the private negotiations of virtue. Contemporary women, like the public assertions through activism, law, and media, highlights like the structure, inequalities, and the strategic adoptions. It shows the dynamic evolutions of the family scrutiny and the agency. Here is the comparative analysis like the moral gaze and agency, like Pamela versus contemporary women, like the dimensions, Pamela in the 18th century, the contemporary women in the 21st century. That some insight we can understand through these charts, like moral gaze, agency, form of the resilience, adaptations to the constraint, empowerment trajectory. And the conclusion, implications of the moral scrutiny and evolving agency traces historical and the contemporary moral surveillance, shows evolutions of female agency, highlights persistence, structure pressures, and the adaptive strategies. Interrogates the literature, feminist critiques, and the cultural studies for the scholarly synthesis. Like the if we analyzes links past and present, showing agency as a strategic, rational, and the adaptive. Here are some references which I have used here, and thank you. So welcome. The questions are welcome.
Hello, Chetna. So my question is, how does Pamela's agency relate to modern female empowerment?
So the digital moral gaze like shifts from society's physical surveillance to the online judgment. Now people are judging online platforms like the social medias. They are using using comment sections. They are using some like sometimes judgment is two types, like the positive one then the negative one. But the people are now have freedom that they can say whatever they want to say.
So Chetna, my question is, how does the digital moral gaze change Pamela to modern woman?
So the Pamela's agency lies her in ability to like negotiate power through virtue and the self expressions. But now women have that the right to raise their voice, reclaiming voice, and social platforms that allows women to defend their identity. So thank you. This is from my side.
Wilson argues that Pamela is an unfiled note by external events like a marriage, but by the heroine's inner growth. And epistolary form reveal her changing mind and resolve the supposed split in the novel structure. This table of content, the content we will be follow. Introduction. The novel's process seemingly endless argument about its meaning. Pamela is often seen of either a meritorious young his or a paragon of virtue. Modern interpretation is completed by its sharp eye or sagacity and its tendency of suspect professional of piety. The problem of interpretation, Pamela, and critical debate. Wilson argues that readings by Donovan and Golden will insightful are essential and peripheral to the structure, then evolution from the developing character of the heroine. The core of the novel is the development of a heroine who is both heroine and narrator. The argument of unity challenging the bifurcation, the supposed fellow. Pamela is bifurcated because the marriage almost actually in the middle, making the rest seen and superfluous. This radically departs from the typically comic plot where marriage completed the action. Wilson thesis, internal conflict and resolution. Pamela undergoes a prolonged, intense, and emotional experience. The novel structure evolves from the developing character of Pamela. The epistolary mode and character revelation. The epistolary mode of allow us know Pamela better than character like Mole Roxana. Richardson technical is a running record of significance and fluctuating feeling from the point of view and the letter writer. The narrative is almost immediate through Pamela's letter and a journal to her parents. She is a highly reliable source for her own experience. Even her understanding of world is limited. If we are to understand her experience, we must first know Pamela. Pamela's character at the novel's opening, adolescent paradox. Pamela is just approaching the full of flower of adolescence. Just turned 15. She is neither a child nor a woman. Like a gent, she looks both way, and her paradoxical nature is neither unusual nor difficult of account for. Genuine simplicity. Her early life was a simple, uncompleted, and until service. Hardly more than Clorist, she revised on the ready-made of education and read the Bible of Aesop's fable. Style, imagery, and the adolescent mind style and decount. Her writing style is the notably uncompletely reflective skill of narrator. Sentences are often short and concise, liked by coordination with a familiar homily and Joelian imagery. Imagery is a homily, commonplace, and therefore perfectly appropriate to her age and education. Animal or plants. Heart is a new birds in a cage, surviving like a bird in a winter upon hips and house. The adolescent mind is its tendency of think and judge the term of the polar opposites. parental influence and internal conflict and repressive ethos. Her parents' letters have a gloomy, admonitory style, placing an emphasis and physical alone. This is the fundamental conflict. The issue is an internal conflict between the moral principles that implicitly forbid the kind of love and awakening need of the young girl and emotional and physical affection. The true unity of Pamela, reinforcing the critical lens. The novel's structural unity balance derives from the evolution Pamela character and final resolution of tension created during the ordeal before marriage. Then conclusion. Wilson shows that Pamela's true unity lies in the heroine's inner journey from the unconscious to self-knowledge and later make this growth visible, turning moral struggle into narrative structure. The novel's climax is emotional and psychological, not just a marriage, making a Pamela is a coherent story of moral awakening. So these are references. And ask me question, I fulfill answer.
So, Dimple, my question is, how does Wilson explain the unity of Pamela?
The Pamela is comes from Pamela's inner growth and her moral struggle, emotional. His emotional from this continuous journey. So, anyone?
So, Dimple, my question is, how does the epistolary form shape Pamela's character?
Her letters show her simple, youthful mind and relieve her conflict between virtue and desire. So, this is from my side, and thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today's my topic is Pamela and the birth of English novel, the epistolary form and psychological realism. So let's start. This is my academic and presentation details. These are my research question and hypothesis. So my research question is, how does Richardson use the letter form in Pamela to show the character's inner feeling and moral struggle? And my hypothesis are throughout the epistolary form, Richardson allowed readers to see Pamela's thoughts and emotion directly, making her moral journey feel real and personal. This connection between emotion and virtue helped create a new kind of realistic storytelling that shaped the novels. This is a table of contents. Introduction.
Samuel Richardson's Pamela, or Virtue Rewarded, is widely recognized as a foundational work in the development of the English novel. It transformed prose fiction by using the epistolary form, narratives constructed entirely throughout the letters to create an unprecedented sense of psychological realism. Throughout this form, Richardson granted his heroine a direct and intimate voice, allowing readers to experience her emotions, fears, and moral struggle in real time. The novel's success not only popular the latter form as a narrative technique, but also established a new standards for representing subjectivity and internet interiority in fiction. Historical context: the rise of English novel and Richardson's world. The early 18th century saw a major transformation in English literature, driven by rising literacy and the expansion of print culture. Richardson wrote Pamela within this context, using later writing as a literary device to explore virtue, social mobility, and morality. The epistolary form, structure, and function. The epistolary structure of Pamela gives the novel its distinctive immediacy and authenticity. Pamela's letters are a record of her inner life and performative act of self-preservation, allowing her to construct her identity and navigate her circumstance. Readers' engagement and the psychology of reading. The epistolary technique transforms the reader's role from passive observer to active participant. We experience event alongside Pamela, sharing her uncertainty, fear, and hope. This creates a deep psychological engagement, making Pamela not just a moral tale, but an exploration of the actors of storytelling itself. Psychological realism and characterization. Pamela's characterized by its psychological realism, showing what characters think and feel inside. Richardson narrative techniques mirrored the era's didactic values while pioneering psychological realism, blending moral instruction with detailed depiction of character consciousness. Next one is a gender, virtue, and narrative voice. Throughout the epistolary form, Richardson introduced a female-centered perspective that was revolutionary for itself. Pamela's voice became a site of resistance and self-definition, allowing her to narrate her own moral emotional journey. The next one is the novel's legacy and influence. Pamela's success marked the birth of the modern English novel, inspiring later writers such as Fielding, Austen, and Bronte. Richardson's manipulation of later writing as a means of self-representation influenced the evolution of first-person narration and the psychological depth characteristic of the realist tradition. And conclusion. In conclusion, Pamela stands as a landmark in literary history for unifying from form and psychology. The novel's power lies not merely in its moral message, but in its ability to dramatize consciousness, to show the making of self throughout writing. So these are the resources, and thank you. If you have any query, please feel free to ask questions.
So Divya, my question is, what is the relationship between morality and the psychology in the Pamela?
Thank you for the question. In the novel,
In the novel, a relationship between morality and psychology shows a complex relationship. It highlights in the way in which individual individual navigate a moral dilemma and construct their identities.
So, Divya, what is the role of Pamela's letters in a novel?
Pamela's letters are means of her self-expression, self-preservation, and moral reflection, uh, allowing her to construct her identity and her circumstance. So that's it from my side. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Hiralba Jadeja. My topic is psychoanalytic study of Pamela Andrews and Mr.B in Pamela. These are my academic information. This is table of content. My research question is, how do Freudian psychoanalytic concept, ID, ego, superego, defense mechanism, and modern critical perspective illuminate the psychological journeys of Pamela Andrews and Mr.B in Samuel Richardson Pamela? My hypothesis is that Pamela Andrews utilizes her virtue as a psychological defense mechanism against the trauma inflicted by Mr. B's ID-driven desire, resulting in concluding relationship that aligns with the critical interpretation of Stockholm syndrome, while Mr. B undergoes a forced superego development to resolve his inner guilt. This is introduction. In this Pamela, the focus on the deep psychological dimension of Samuel Richardson Pamela, or virtue rewarded. The narrative is examined through a Freudian psychoanalytic lens to understand the complex mental and emotional interplay between a morally steadfast servant and her dominant master. The heroine virtues, often preserved as a mere innocence, may be reinterpreted as an intentional psychological strategy, a form of superego regulation that allow her to preserve integrity and identity, aimed corrosion, fear, and power dynamics. From this perspective, Richardson work transcends the moral framework of its age, offering a compelling psychological portrayal of human endurance, resilience, and the mind's capacity for survival under intense emotional pressure. Freudian framework, Pamela superego control. A moral consciousness, Pamela is the superego. Her entire psychology is dominated by conscience and purity. She represents the voice of social and religious law, constant self-checking. Her voluminous letters function as a mechanism for constant self-reflection and moral justification from the superego activity, defense against guilt. Clinging to virtue becomes a psychological defense, protecting her not only from physical violation but also from the internal calls she associates with moral failure. Pamela's fear, anxiety, and trauma. Reaction to trauma. Triggering events, Mr. B repeated advance and isolation, acute anxiety. Pamela exhibits classic symptoms, isomania, hypervigilance, emotional defense mechanism, crying, fainting, and prayer used to help or escape immediate threats, powerlessness. As a servant girl, she lacks social, economic, and physical control. The trauma is driven by this fundamental power imbalance. Pamela's emotional transformation and Stockholm critics. From fear to forgiveness, the shift. Pamela emotional state transitions from profound fear and resistance to eventual forgiveness, empathy, and eventual affection for Mr. B. The critical lens. Modern psychoanalytic critic argued that Mr. B cursive techniques and confinement constitute a form for pathological possessions. Her eventual affection in interpreted as an indication of Stockholm syndrome or survival mechanism where a captive bound with their captor. Mr. B, the psychology of power and desire, a dual personality, ego versus an ID conflict, divided mind. Mr. B's psyche is a battleground between instinctual desire and social conscience. Early ID impulses, his initial behavior, manipulation, control, and aggression reflects ID impulses seeking immediate sexual satisfaction overriding rational thoughts. The struggle, his conscience gradually awakens, initiating a psychological struggle to transform his primitive lust into genuine moral affection. Mr. B, narcissism, control, and guilt. Narcissism and control. Narcissist traits, he requires admiration and total power over Pamela to confirm his high social status and self-importance, guilt and inner reforms, superego development as a Pamela virtues remains unbroken despite his efforts. Mr. B begins to internalize her morality, resolving guilt. His eventual legitimate love for Pamela becomes a means of resolving his inner guilt, transforming his initial destructive desire into moral respect and to social order. Mr. B dependency and reductions, reverser of power. Once Pamela grants her forgiveness and affection, the former oppressor becomes emotionally dependent on her purity and stabilizing moral presence. Psychological closure. Mr. B's journey ends with his symbolic reformation, demonstrating that commitment to love and morality can ultimately heal corrupted instinct and resolve the internal conflict of the and idea. Comparative psychological profiles. These are features and Pamela Andrews and Mr. B. Pamela superego and ID. In feature 2, core motivation, survival, maintaining virtue, and Mr. B achieving sexual possession. These are my conclusion. This hypothesis proved that the central tension of Pamela is a psychological drama rooted in Freudian concept. Pamela's virtues is best understood as an active superego defense, a mechanism she constructed to ensure psychological survival against the perceived trauma inflicted by Mr. B's powerful impulses. This is my learning outcomes. This my references. And thank you. If you have any question.
How does Pamela's superego helps her survivor meets advances?
Pamela superego, her morality, prayer, and self-control acts as a psychological shield. It protects her from trauma and gives her strength to resist Mr. B. Anyone?
So my question is, what psychological change happened in Mr. B by the end of the novel?
Mr. B transformed ID-driven desire to superego maturity. Pamela's virtue forces him to reform. Thank you. This is for my side.
Hello, audible? Not to you, of course, but on the live or not. Otherwise, it's going to be a waste of time and energy in that case. Can you please check? Hello? Audible? Okay. So, considering that this is your first season of presentations, good work is done in terms of preparing PPTs to answering questions and all those things. Although I find it interesting that you answered all the questions. However, there are some things which you still need to work on, and that is one, main text citation was missing from many presentations. Main text citation means if you're talking about Alexander Pope, you have to cite Alexander Pope. If you're talking about Pamela, you have to cite Richardson. So many of you are don't have that. Bhargavi, then I think we still had Dimple Darby also didn't have that, right? And where you do have the main text citation, then you are facing issues with in-text citation, right? Main text citation is citing the original novel or work, right? In-text citation is when you cite within the slide, right? So if you've used a particular research article, where exactly are you pointing out that particular article's argument? Let's say within the slides you have used that particular person's arguments, you have to mention where exactly, right? So then that is missing in many of the presentations, in text citation. Another is, even when people have done in text citation, they have done it at the center of the slide, as if it is the bottom title of the slide. No, that is not how in-text citation is supposed to be done. In-text is supposed to be done next to the sentence wherein you have received that particular source's arguments. So let's say I am referring to Richardson or Pope and I have cited their original lines, for example. So then their in-text citation should be beside that particular line, not at the end of the slide. Right? So that structural things you need to now manage. If you've done in text, then do it properly in that case. If you haven't done it, start doing it now. Why? Because why is this necessary? In-text citation tells you where exactly your arguments are falling, right? And which particular argument have you utilized and which particular argument belongs to somebody else. Right? If you have to read a particular presentation and identify which of those things are the presenter's original thoughts and which of those are influenced by somebody else's observations, then that can be done only if you have done in-text citation and cited that person properly. right? So then placing of the in-text is very much important in that case. Another is the issue with citing the original text themselves, right? Some of you have cited Gutenberg, some of you have cited Google Books, right? Now, those, of course, they are legitimate, authentic sources, no argument in that case. But when you cite those sources, those links should be there in, in the URL. And another is the publication date should be of the original text, not on the day that particular text was modified and updated on the Gutenberg website. That is one. If you want to, let's say, highlight that the Gutenberg people have modified the text, digitalized it, and then updated on their site, and want to keep it as a separate citation, then you can do. Surely. Then you can highlight that this particular text was updated in 2005, 2015, so on and so forth, right? But when it comes to citing the original author, you should refer to the original publication. So let's say if you're referring to Pope, so 1717 should be the date, not 2005 or 2015, right? Because that is when the text was modified and updated on the website, right? It was originally published in 1717. So those things you need to now see when you do the citations. Another is the framing of the hypothesis also. Now in Shivani's presentation, for example, your hypothesis begins with yes, right? So that is not the way a hypothesis is supposed to be. Hypothesis is just an assertive statement, which you will then either deny or agree with in your presentation, right? So now that, because this is, of course, and I'm not blaming you for this, because this is the first time that you are fitting your ideas into this kind of a research structure. So from now on, you can start working in this direction. Hypothesis is basically an assertive statement, right? A statement which you make, and then you sort of discuss that statement throughout your presentation. And while discussing, you can either agree with that statement or you can disagree with that statement. That is up to you. So, and that agreement or disagreement will then be reflected in the conclusion of your presentation. So that is how you need to do, right? So in the hypothesis, try to see that you don't just provide statements from sources, or just try to put it informally. Put it in a proper formal assertive structure in that case. Many of you are still reading slides a lot, right? Reading slides a lot means kuch zyada hai, line to line, word to word reading, right? Now I can understand, since this is your first attempt, it is obvious, very natural that you don't have that much confidence level. You do get aware of the live, you do get aware of the people evaluating you and so on and so forth. So it's very obvious. But from now on, right? From now on, as you move towards the next semester or the next papers in that case, right? Tomorrow you still have Romantic Age, Victorian Age presentations. Slowly and steadily try to gain confidence enough to have eye contact, discuss things without the use of the slide. You do rely on the slide, right? Because that is where your main points are there. But when it comes to explaining them, don't read them. Right? Just give a gist, or just highlight the main things verbally instead of doing that. Another thing is asking questions. Now, Sandeep, a question which is already answered in the presentation, you don't need to ask, right? So that is something now you need to do. You asked a question to, who was it? Yes, Aditya. He actually did, and we have lost connection. Yeah, it has stopped from here. Yes, we are back. So, you asked Aditya a question about explaining the term which he had used, right? Now, it was already there in the presentation. He had actually defined the term, where the term came from. Now, when it comes to asking questions or answering them during a presentation, you do not ask the same question from the presenter if they have already explained things. So, for example, if I am viewing your presentation and ask you about who is Alexander Pope, right? So there's no point in asking that question because you have already discussed it. So try to come up with questions which are either reflecting your stance on the presentation. Let's say Aditya has presented something and you want to know more, or if you want to sort of present a different view from Aditya's observations or arguments, then that question is a good question to ask, right? So that is how things should be. Another is when it comes to the MLA citation, the overall works cited list which you prepare, right? Resources and references and words that you use. Now, in that also, many of you haven't maintained alphabetical order, right? So W kahin hai, or D kahin hai, or B kahin hai, A kahin hai. That was there in Hiral's presentation, Divya's presentation, right? So even in Sandeep's presentation for that matter, right? So try to see that when you do MLA citations, maintain the alphabetical order, because that is part of the regulations of the MLA citation format, right? Another is when it comes to discussing concepts which you use, whether it is psychoanalysis, whether it is language of the heart kind of a concept, whether it is a social satire kind of a concept, explain the concept or include at least some background to where the concept came from. For example, in your presentation, Sandeep, you use this term, language of the heart. Now, who gave that phrase, right? Or where does that concept come from? And if you have referred to, let's say you do know where that particular source comes from, then cite the source. In your citations, I found every citation except for that concept, language of the heart. Now, it was the gist, it was basically the highlight of your presentation, right? Your presentation title includes the language of the heart, but you don't explain where that particular concept comes from. So then you have to include that in your presentation. Make sure to correct that. When it comes to citations, again, things that you put as examples, right? Text that you mention as examples to justify your observations. Let's say I'm saying about Tale of a Tub, but I'm also referring to Gulliver's Travels in my presentation, right? And I am citing it as an example of my observation by saying ki idhar bhi social satire hai, udhar bhi social satire. But then I miss citing Gulliver's Travel, I just cite A Tale of a Tub. So that shouldn't happen, right? Both, whichever example you cite should also be there in the citations list at the end of the presentation. Another is when you make claims about comparative analysis. So in Nancy's presentation, there was this statement in her learning outcomes. That is, Gulliver's Travels is almost like Abhigyan Shakuntalam. You cannot make such a claim so randomly, right? Although it does reflect some direction of thought which you might have, like, while preparing the PPT, you might have thought, okay, this is almost like this. You need to prove. Learning outcome is when you actually prove that after reading all these things, these are the outcomes. Outcomes cannot be randomly presented, right? So when it comes to learning outcomes, therefore, you have to see that it is actually an outcome of the discussion that is done in the presentation. Your presentation doesn't mention anywhere Kalidas or even Abhigyan Shakuntalam, right? So in what context are you talking? Another is when it comes to citing Abhigyan Shakuntalam, that text itself has its own context, relevance, linguistic analysis, and number of things to do. So, sorry, yeah? Mic is off. Nice. Acha, okay. Okay. So then, when it comes to Abhigyan Shakuntalam, therefore, if you're making such a claim as a part of your learning outcome, you have to prove how and why, right? Or if you want to do such a claim, then add a comparative slide in your presentation where you compare Gulliver's Travels with Abhigyan Shakuntalam, actually point out where both these texts are similar, how these texts are different. Something in that line should be there if you want to make a statement like that in your learning outcomes. Now, since we are on learning outcomes, another major issue with learning outcomes is don't list out the questions as learning outcomes. You might have prepared presentations to perhaps prepare answers for the questions that you have in your question bank. Good call, objective is also good enough, but that cannot be part of your learning outcomes, right? Learning outcomes is, as I mentioned earlier, it is something which happens at the end of the presentation, right? And even when you highlight learning outcomes, you have to see that something nuanced is added there. After working on this entire presentation, how do you look at Pope? Right? After preparing the answer, what is your take on Swift or Gray or anybody else for that matter? Right? So when you do learning outcomes list, right, you shouldn't list out the questions that you have in your question bank. Right? Learning outcomes is, this is what I learned, this is what I observed, this is what I got to know, or this is how I am now perceiving this particular text. So what kind of change has happened after preparing this presentation, after reading these texts? Those can be learning outcomes. Questions from question bank cannot be considered as learning outcomes. Another is, when it comes to learning outcomes, therefore, you cannot even assume that you have a particular imaginary learners who are learning from your presentation also, right? So in, I think in, it was in KHUSHI's presentation or even in JENCY's presentation, you did highlight the fact that learners will learn these things from my presentation. You cannot assume things that learners will learn these things, right? You don't know who your learners are in that case, right? So then again, a very assumed position you are taking in that case. If you do want to highlight it as takeaways from this presentation, that would be a good way of formulating your learning outcomes, right? But you highlight learning outcomes and then list out things which people might learn. Now that is not the way you point out learning outcomes in that case. So try to work it out. If you put it as a good sign, it was suggested earlier to semester 3 students, right? And now it has become a part of the standard presentation format also. But again, it is a suggestion. If you want to add, do add. It adds good quality to your presentation if you do, right? Sorry? You can just keep it as the tabular format and just say that these are my learning outcomes, right? You don't need to read them out aloud. That is not necessary, right? So keep it as a tabular format. That's why I appreciate the gesture of putting a tabular format in learning outcomes. That's a good call when it comes to preparing the PPT. But as I said, tabular format, somebody is going to read your tabular format. If not anybody, at least me or sir or whoever is reading the slide, right? So then what you put in the tabular format also matters, right? So in that case, try to list out things, but make sure that learning outcomes are properly listed in that case. When it comes to, yes, Nancy's presentation, right? Again, sorry to highlight you out, but hypothesis and learning outcomes don't match in your PPT, right? So now that again is an issue with learning outcomes. Learning outcomes can happen when you have a particular structure which you have followed and then you have the result that is the outcome. That is why it is called learning outcome, which is basically referring to the result of your learning, right? So now if you set out with the hypothesis, with the objective to study satire in Gulliver's Travels and Tale of a Tub, right? Your learning outcomes should be reflected in that direction. What do you now understand as satire? Do you see any distinction in the satire used by Swift in both these texts? So all those things should be part of your learning outcomes and not the comparison which you presented and which I discussed earlier. When it comes to citing texts, particularly poetry, right? And this is where I've cut marks of many people. Poetry Foundation, although a good source, try to avoid it as much as possible, right? The reason is when it comes to Alexander Pope or Thomas Gray or Robert Burns, their poetry do have original works which have been uploaded on various sites like Google Books or Gutenberg or in that case. So you should rely on those citations than relying on Poetry Foundation, right? Otherwise, presentations were good, but this thing is there. If let's say if those original books are not digitized, not available on any of Internet Archive or Google Books or Gutenberg, then perhaps you can cite Poetry Foundation in that case, right? then it's okay. Like in Indian English literature, for example, we did have an issue with this case. One of Rachna Joshi's poem, for example, was not available on website anywhere, right? Not even on blog, not even on website, not even on Poetry Archive or Poetry Foundation or Literary Ness or any sort of blog in that matter. But so therefore, whatever was available was just one student's blog, right? They had the particular original poem there. So then that had to be cited. Why? Because it was not available anywhere else. So then therefore that can be done. But since we are dealing with neoclassical age and most of the authors are such whose works have been digitized in one or the other way, so then you use that source, cite their original citation in that case. And even when you use Gutenberg or Internet Archive, make sure the date is proper. You cite the original publication date, not when the Internet Archive or Gutenberg uploaded that. If you want to highlight, again, as I said earlier, if you want to highlight Gutenberg or Internet Archive, you can keep it as a separate citation also, or just share the link in your URL section of the citation. So that is something which you need to do. Yes, and in Chetna's presentation, for example, presentation was good. Structure-wise, argument-wise, you presented it well as well. But there is one slide of theoretical frameworks in your PPT, right? Feminism and all those things you have mentioned there. Now, when you are presenting that, what I was looking for is you try to prove how those frameworks are relevant. You have provided in your PPT, you have explained how those frameworks are relevant for your hypothesis and your question which you have said. But I was looking for listening to that particular justification from your side, right? How are those frameworks useful to you while reading Pamela from a kind of a moral gaze, or the idea of transformation in perception, feminism and female perception in the digital era, and all the self-representation and all those things. That justification somewhere you missed out. So try to prove it next time in the upcoming. Spelling errors, Millen's presentation, right? Key quotes spelling was wrong, right? So try to correct it before you upload your PPT on any of the web platforms, right? Riddhi, your presentation was good, but very low voice, and you were not even looking at people. So as I said earlier, it's obvious, natural to lose confidence on your first attempt, but try to work on those things from now on, right? And another thing about your presentation is the title slide was missing, right? You clubbed everything in the first slide. You mentioned your personal details as well as the title of the presentation in the same slide, right? Avoid doing that. Keep the title different and your personal information different, right? So keep it as two different slides in your PPT. Rudra's presentation. When you cite main text, right, it has to be part of your in-text also, right? You have highlighted lines from Pope, lines from Milton, but you haven't cited Milton or Pope when you keep it in your slides there, right? So how are we supposed to assume, are they from your personal inspiration or something? No, you have to keep it as part of your presentation, in text also of the main text. Shehzad's presentation, good presentation, and one thing I've already mentioned, Poetry Foundation source. If you can avoid it, try to avoid it. My suggestion, and this is not a problem, but rather a suggestion from my side, is try to include something about the age of sensibility, right? Because you have highlighted satire and all those factors. Now, when we move towards Thomas Gray and Robert Burns, what you find, and even Pamela for that matter, what you find, and this you have highlighted in your presentation also, right? You move towards individual expression of thoughts. You move towards not a social kind of an objective, but rather an individual kind of objective for writing those texts, right? And therefore you find the concept of sensibility more relevant to those discussions, right? And you do have a very good text there, the dissociation of sensibility by Eliot. That concept can be taken and then read in that case, so that will provide depth to your observations in the later presentations also. Dimple's presentation, the presentation was good, but since that particular source which you have mentioned, Google Books source you have cited, right? But that source is not accessible, right? Google Books is there, but if you click on the read ebook kind of button, you cannot open that book. So now if you have Google Books there as a citation, right, and you have putting it as a citation, which is again a good gesture, try to see that those texts, if you've cited, they should be accessible. If you have a website, if you have a link, then it should be clickable and that particular text should open when you click, right? So instead of Google Books, cite the Internet Archive, right? Internet Archive has Pope's entire text, right? And that is accessible also. People are able to read it openly. On Google Books, sometimes this might happen. So be careful from your next presentations that when you cite Google Books, sometimes it might not give you accessible texts. You might not be able to read the original texts. So then see if other options are available. Right? In some presentations like Shivani or I did find some issues with the slides which were designed, this design of the slides, right? So if you are dealing with a concept like satire or social satire or something like that, you cannot have magical rings going on in your slides, right? If you are basically, when you prepare the presentation, even the slides play a huge role in the way your readers read and your listeners listen, right? So when I'm presenting something, for example, my slides either should be plain, simple slides, nothing of decoration in that case. Or if you do add some sort of a designer element there, then they should be relevant to the topic which you are presenting, right? So that should now, when you prepare the next presentations, right, be careful with the designs that you choose, right? Aditya, in-text citation were missing. And one point I've already mentioned, that is you do give examples. You have examples from various poems, but you haven't cited those poems in your PPT. So try to do that. Sandeep, you do need to work. You are good with non-verbal skills, right? When it comes to making eye contact and speaking with a very proper tone and precision in that case. But when it comes to the content of your presentation, as I said, there was no alphabetical order in the citations also, and you missed out on explaining the concept of the language of the heart, from where did it come, right? Even the main text was missing, right? When you do have, and this is a general instruction for all of you, right? When you have something which you have employed as a general characteristic of the entire age, for example, and then you give examples from the various texts of the age, right? So for example, if you're taking up something which applies to all the works of neoclassical age, right? But then as you move forward in your presentation, you have highlighted, let's say, Swift, you have highlighted Pope, you highlighted Gray, then those poets, their works should be there in your citations, at least. Even if you are not actively citing them in the PPT slides, if it is not there in your in-text, right? Why? Because you are dealing with characteristic and not individual works, right? So even if that is not, it should be there in your references, the last list which you prepare, right? Even if it is a very generalized characteristic kind of a topic there. So try to work on those things, right? Okay, otherwise things were good enough. Many of you still are struggling with maintaining time in your presentation, so I hope that you do that from the next. But still today, it is good that most of the presenters, they finished on time, and we did have a timely conclusion of the morning session of the first season and second day of semester 1 presentations. This is where I'm ending the live.